And for me, it's I made music not as a passion, but as a need. And a need to heal, a need, to be happy, a need, to find, you know what I mean? I've always been looking for something.
Welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well too, and it's a pleasure to chat with you. And you have quite an incredible story, and I think it's important to take things all the way back to give people context for where you're at today. And your story with the piano, which is such an integral part of your life and your career, goes all the way back to 2 years old. And you ended up finding a piano abandoned in a forest. So I'd love to hear that story.
Well, it's kind of funny how news, travel. It wasn't in a forest really, but we had a kind of very old piano that was not really in a usable manner, if I could say. And I was just twinkling the ivory and just touching and discovering sound through this, and that's how I started. Yeah.
And in the very beginning, did you feel yourself drawn to this medium, or was it kind of a relationship that developed more over time?
No, it's really funny. I mean, I don't know if funny is the right word, but I all I remember was that I was so attracted by the sound, just the sound of one note, and it felt like subconsciously, right? Because I was only 2 years old. I was just making my own things, right? Just listening to the sound and just playing keys. And that's I made my first piece of I don't know, I was three or something because I was that's how I started. I didn't have lessons. I just you know I mean, I always say that it was more out of a need than a passion. You know what I mean? It was really a need, 'cause and I understood, like, I don't know, 30 years later that it was my way to heal, you know? Music was, basically healing me, but I didn't at the time. I only knew, "Oh my god, it feels so good," it feels good to and then my mind was just focused on the music.
Well, let's get deeper into the story. You talk about it being a need at the time. What was the need from? What were you going through that you needed this outlet?
When you're 2, 3 years old, you don't really know consciously, right? But you're doing things like, kind of subconsciously because it feels right. And I mean, I see it with, I've got 2 babies now, and I see how they behave, and I'm like, wow, my son, got a little flu, nothing major, but he didn't want to eat, in the evening. I was like, fine, don't eat. It's funny. He felt like I, I, I don't want to eat, right? And he's 2 years old, and I thought that was amazing because why would I force him to eat? He's feeling no, that's not. I cannot eat right now. And thanks God because when he did, right, then he threw up. So he knew I should not eat. And I think it's the same for me when I started, right? Like it just felt right to it was this need, that I had, to this attraction to the piano, but I didn't understand, of course, at that time why? Now I do, of course, because it was really shitty. The way I grew up was so tough that it was my only, salvation. It was the only way to escape, to escape everything, pain, basically, mainly pain, right? To escape pain. And when you make music, I mean, when I was making music, I was escaping everything. I was creating my own world, and I understood this later in life, right? I didn't understand at the time, but it literally for me saved me, right? Because it was a difficult childhood, and music was just healing me.
Well, you mentioned there briefly, the challenging times you had as a kid. Let's get into some of those details to paint the picture a little bit deeper for people. What was life like as a kid?
That as well is, I mean, I think is interesting for me to try and understand. I have very few memories of my childhood, right? And I think it's because of the trauma. I don't remember school. I don't remember, I only have little brief, like very difficult, moments. Most of them are kind of tough moment because I grew up in a kind of a cult, right? Uh, and it's yeah. I mean, long story short, my mother was a single mom because my supposed to be father apparently was not my father. I mean, all this kind of shit. I don't even know today. I don't care. But what I know is that she was a bit weak at some point. She was a bit, she was a bit, vulnerable, and she found this woman who was basically, kind of started her own cult, and she was extremely dangerous. And that, I figured out much later in life. It was, and she destroyed everything, right? I mean, everything. And basically, that was the kind of pain, I grew up in, basically. Yeah.
As you're going through this challenging time, you mentioned the cult and being brought up in this radical environment. Did you realize that your life was different, and did you feel the pain at that time, or is it just looking back on that time that you really can put the pieces together and realize what you went through?
When you don't know anything else, you, you don't realize anything, because you think, okay, this is it. This is how life is. And it took me such a long time, to realize, no, this is not how life should be, right? And even this idea of God, right? Because it's a there is a word that is syncretism, right? It's mixing different bits of religions together to make, your own, right? And some people say as well, that religions are cult that succeeded and cult are religions that failed, right? I mean, I don't know if I agree with that, but obviously with my upbringing, I'm not really religious, right? Because I think, too many people died because of religion. And in the cult I was in, there was very, very, very bad stuff. When I was 17, I had, the kind of secret services, French secret services with files like this, about the cult. And I was like, what the heck? Like, I was like, yeah, well, there's this. I'm like, oh my God, it's so everything was true. Everything was real. Everything was so screwed up. And, you know, I the only thing I knew was, if God is real, and if God is supposed to be love and, and kind, then all of this shouldn't happen, right? So it made me question very earlier on, right? What is life? Because when I had the guru, taking me by my hair, through the stairs, or beating me up with 40 people around to take the ego I had in me, like, yeah, I'm 8 years old or 9 years old, what the heck, right? But it's funny, it didn't. I think your subconscious comes in, right? And then perhaps also the quality of your consciousness, right? I never saw myself as a victim. I was like, hey, I carry on, And even today, today I'm 38 years old, and I forgave my mother, and my mother got out, and now she's healing. She's much better. It's a, it's a, yeah, life, it goes around. Just we just need to move forward, right? I mean, it's a bit like this thing right now, right? With this, what we are experiencing right now. I think we cannot see ourselves as victims and being, letting fear take over, right?
Let's go back to exiting the cult. You mentioned the Secret Service and discussing your situation with them. How did you end up ejecting yourself from such a situation?
Pain, too much, too much, too much, too much, too much pain. I mean, I was physically, I was dying, right? I mean, eh, yeah, my health was really, really, really bad. And the day of my 18th birthday, I left. I didn't leave before because they made sure that I was scared enough, to be in deep trouble. And it's all, brainwashing. So the day of the 18th birthday, I just left, and I was like, you know what, I'll survive. I'll survive. I don't have anything, so I have nothing to lose. You know?
And through the years, from 2 to 18 when you left the cult, were you playing the piano regularly, or was that kind of ebbs and flows within that period of time?
Every time I could find a piano, I was playing, but the piano ended up being in my mind. So I play in my head all the time, like all the time, most of my songs, yeah, it's just you hear, because it's it's words, right? Like, when you speak, most of the time people are gonna first, think, and they think, what is thinking? Thinking is only, it's speaking in your mind, right? I mean, and that's that's what I was doing, and still today, right? I'm composing music in my head. So basically, and then when I have a piano, it just gets out through my fingers, but the process is the same.
So when you're in this cult, this is in France, you end up picking up, leaving everything that you know, including family, and moving to London. So talk about what that transition was like and how, life evolved from there.
I mean, not quite, but yeah, pretty much. I mean, a long story short, because it's too long. But I was looking for jobs, here and there, trying to survive, right? My first interview was at McDonald's, and they didn't even want me. So my self confidence was already low. But when I didn't pass, a McDonald interview, I was like, oh my god, that's terrible. you know, it was. Hey, I'm not kidding. I mean, I remember very well this interview, and I was like, oh my god, I cannot even nail an interview. But anyways, finding, yeah, I had to find job to survive, right? And I was studying as well at the time, right? I mean, I was doing several things, started with law, and yeah, I was like, okay, everybody was pushing me to be a kind of lawyer. For me, I was like, make my music. School was easy for me. But I was not interested. I loved, I loved creating, making music, writing, creating. And so finding little jobs. And then I was a paid prefect in a school. Um, and it's weird to hear. When you go back to memories, right? It triggers. The first thing I did, I I saved like, I think it was $400, and I went to LA. I was like, okay, you know what? I want the sun. I want to make music. That's what I want to do. Fuck it. And at the time, you could have an open ticket with no return or something, right? So, so that's what I did. And in LA was a kind of a I found a job to like clean toilets in exchange for a room in a hostel, right? It was around the Man's Shiny Theater around there, like 20 years ago. Oh my God, feeling old. I love it. But wow, yeah, and it was a long time ago. That was the first thing I did. I was like, well, I have nothing to lose. Let's move country. Let's just get out to like make my music. But it was really hard. I almost got like raped by a priest. That was a funny story. Who I don't know. He spotted me on the street, and he knew I wasn't American. I don't know why. I was like, is there a look to American? You know, and yeah, it's really weird. But anyway, and wouldn't work in LA because it's really hard without a visa, blah blah blah. So went back to France, then moved to Paris, trying to find little jobs. So every time I could play a piano, I would play. I wouldn't care. I didn't have any code, because the way I grew up without really television, without music, without it was. So I was like, yeah, nothing, nothing to lose. Just try to be. For me, it was always very important to try and be, not to try, to be the best person I could be. Like morally, being okay. I'm a good man. That's it. No compromise on that. Like ever. Don't do compromise. And carried on, and then at some point moved to the UK. And in UK, same thing, trying to find jobs, to survive, and it was really difficult for me to work in all these very difficult, jobs, because it felt like I was in jail or something, That's probably because of my upbringing. So, and studying, it's not that yeah, I hated it, to be honest with you. I really hated it. I hated studying because they wanted me to do this and I wanted to do that. And I didn't understand why. Why study this when, guys, I mean, we should be studying that, right? I mean, life is beautiful. I always had a lot of hope. And that's probably because of this rubbish, environment. I was like, come on, can be anything, can do anything you want. Just, try and be the best you can. And for me, best means being the best person, to be kind, to be compassionate, to help others, to be, come on, let's be good. And then I ended up in Reading. I found a job so Reading is just outside of London. And in 2000, I think it was five, like, oh God. And I found a job at Zara at the time. Zara, yeah. It was really difficult as well because yeah, it was a really hard job. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because all these jobs, people do them, and I have a lot of respect for them because it's tough. You know, it is not as easy people think. You know what I mean? It's tough jobs, and then it was really difficult. So I found a job just after that in a music shop. selling pianos. I was like, great, that's cool. I'm gonna sell pianos. That's great. I'll do my music on the side. Carry on. And I was very depressed because obviously, when you go, through, yeah, through, as a childhood, like this, yeah, of course, you're gonna have like side effects, and the side effects was I've been depressed, my entire life, right? Until a few years ago, and now I'm healed, but it took a long, long time because piano, when I was playing music, I was safe. But when I was not playing music and a day is 24 hours, then what do I do? You know? And when I say depressed is, of course, a very, very, very deep depression. I didn't have anyone anymore, right? I mean, when I left, they didn't want me even to talk to my siblings. I didn't see them for 15 years, and now they're adults, and yeah, and it kind of breaks your heart, especially when there is no justice, because they thought it was me, and I felt responsible, and that's what a court does as well to people. They make you feel responsible. It's your fault. You're bad. You're like, and and I carried that, yeah, of course, a long, long time, because it's because that's how it is. And then you try and find a way to heal. So I ended up in Reading, and one day I'm like, this guy comes to the shop. He's like, "Hey, do you wanna, how are you?" And you know how British people say, "How are you?" Like maybe in America as well, but British people is like, "Hey, how are you?" And then they move on because they don't really care about the answers. It's more a rhetorical, thing. And I'm like, "Well, I'm not very good at just want to kill myself." It just came out, And then I realized what I just said. I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just having a bad day. Sorry about that." And and he said, "No, what's wrong?" and stuff like, "No, no, nothing." I really was like, "I'm so sorry because I'm going to lose my job." And then he was like, Let's have a drink after work. What time do you finish? Let's have a drink." And so I ended up by saying, "Okay, let's have a drink." And his name was Michael Freeman. It's funny, right? Funny name sometimes. Life gives you little hints of. and and we went for for just for coffee or something. I mean, no, because I didn't drink coffee, but for a drink or whatever, water or something. And and he helped. I mean, he helped me, yes, because he basically he was a teacher for deaf children, right, in Oxford, and he had his friend who was quite famous classical pianist, and he wanted him to hear me play because I said I was a pianist, right? So he rented the mezzanine of the shop, and we have two pianos facing each other. And I was obviously very scared because, oh my God, I'm not a classical pianist, right? I make my own music. But in the world of classical music, it's very, very, very elitist, right? Which is really weird because, you've got all these people playing classical music, right? So let's say, dead people's music, pretty much, right? And when you make music today as a pianist, as I am, right? I heard by different people, you're not a pianist because you don't play Beethoven or Chopin or Brahms. I'm like, what do you mean? Like those people were also composers, right? They were pianists and composers. So it was. I was like, oh my god, this guy's gonna hate me. He's a classical pianist. I'm like, it's not gonna do anything, and he loved it. Yeah, he loved it. And then he asked me after I played for him. I mean, for both of them, he asked me if he could play with me, and we had a duet, right, facing each other on two grand like Steiner pianos. It was insane. Uh, I had like my whole body shiver. Like it was really beautiful. And then after that, basically, Michael was like, "Hey, you should go to Oxford, right? I mean, to do contemporary music, because like this, if you go there, I'm sure you'll get a scholarship because you're very good, and then you don't have to work. That will be your work. Just study a bit like this. You can meet people and make your music, organize your gigs. It's better than Reading because Reading is, it's not, he said, you're not going to do anything here." And and I did. I was like, okay, So he got me an interview, and then I had an interview, and they seemed to, yeah, to like what I was doing. Like, okay, so you start in September. So I had an unconditional offer, and that was really cool, right? But then I was still depressed. So for me to study, I was like, I didn't want to study, because I was already doing my thing, not as an arrogance thing, but just because when you come from an environment as I did, right, you don't really understand the rules. You don't understand the codes, you don't, you know what I mean? It was very hard for me to be in a group, you know? I hated groups for a long, long time until now. Today, I don't hate, but I'm not a big fan of groups. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, because of course, it's funny how your childhood really changes you, and and for me, I was, and I still am a lonely wolf, right? I live in my mind. I mean, you see, and that's what I love doing. And today, still, right, reading, writing, making music. Of course, taking care of my babies, but I'm not a big group person. It was very, very hard. That was one of the hardest things for me, because of course, because I was so badly treated when I was a kid, that it's just like, nah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how. Yeah.
And up until a few years ago, when you found your way out of depression, it sounds like music and playing the piano was your coping mechanism for a lot of years. Did you have any other coping mechanisms, either healthy ones like the piano or unhealthy?
I mean, I thought I did, so I tried everything. Tried cocaine, tried marijuana, tried alcohol, and it didn't work. It clearly didn't work. I tried, of course, antidepressant as well. Um, I had like countless therapists, psychologists, psychotherapist, like nothing worked. Nothing worked. It was actually almost worse, so it wouldn't work. However, I had a kind of self-defense mechanism from that I always had. It was counting. And I think a lot of people have that as well. Counting everything, always, you know, like everything. Like even with you, we're talking, but we've got the screens like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Like in the background, the background of my head, like the windows, everything. When I walk, everything. And I think I did it, put it in my music as well, because my music has a rhythm, But I don't count when I make music because I'm in the present moment, right? That's the beauty. So I think that was the kind of coping mechanism for sure. I often say like music saved me the first time, and meditation the second, because the problem is I thought, okay, I had a drive, I have my drive, making my music, being happy, and as I told you, right? I mean, I was poor, I didn't have anyone. It's you're just like, well, what do you do, right? Uh, and then in life, you at some point I ended up making a living. Wow, I make a living of my music. This is great, right? I don't have any more problems. At least I'm not on the street again. I'm like, okay, I can make, you know, just making a living of music. It's amazing. But I was still depressed, because I thought, okay, when I make a living, then I will not be depressed anymore, right? And then I understood, whoa, when is just BS, right? And that's what we will think. Okay, when I buy a car, I'll be happy. When I buy a new home, when I don't know, when I do this, when I do that, and nothing really saved me. So I was like, oh God, I can't carry on like this, right? It's killing me. And then I started reading a lot about, actually the brain, and a lot of neuroscience. And I wanted to understand, okay, how does my music affect? Because when I play my music, I feel so safe. I mean, wow. And then I started, of course, sharing my music and receiving quite a few emails about people reacting the same way. Like, thank you, it's healing me, it's helping me, psychiatrists, doctors in schools. And I was like, okay, so it's not just me, right? There is something, So music can help a lot of people. Now, my music seems to have an effect of people, but not just my music, many, many other people. And I wanted to understand that more. So I bought a electro, EEG, it's like bought an EEG to test and see the brain waves, discovered brain waves. Oh, that's really cool, And uh, and I tested some stuff, and I realized, wow, basically there is a state where we have no fear, where we have no pain, where I was like, oh my God, this state I am in when I make my music. So now, how can I get to that state without music? Because I cannot make music 24 hours, right? And And of course, when you have a lot of trauma, you have a lot of nightmares. And I had nightmares every single day of my life, every single day. And of course, now I don't have any nightmares anymore. But it was yeah, it was interesting because I was like, okay, let's dig. And then I started digging, and I actually changed my whole lifestyle. Quit smoking, quit alcohol, like just like this. A long story short, because I can't. But to see, I wanted to see, okay, what is it going to do to my mind, right? Because I know that when I drink, it affects this, right? I mean, and especially me, I had a problem because when I was drinking, I would forget everything. Like, I mean it really, like, give me 3 beers, boom. And then I will be someone else. And I have no recollection of what happened. And I always knew, oh my God, this is really dangerous, right? Because, I don't even know. So I woke up many times with like a black eye. I woke up on the street. I woke up, of course, I mean, I tried to kill myself many times when I was younger because I was not, scared of death, right? I mean, I think it's wrong to do that. No one should do that ever. But, when you don't know, and the pain is too much, just like you want to end up the game, right? It happens. And I'm glad I didn't because now I can actually talk about it, and also explain for me what worked, and for me what worked to start, taking care of myself, and I did. So I started eating healthy. My girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, she was like, "You're gonna do some hot yoga." I was like, "No, I'm not." No. She's like, "No, no, you are. Come on, you need to do something." I'm like, "No." She's like, "Okay, okay, I do it." I said, "Listen, I want to change. I need to because otherwise. And of course, a big event happened before that. That kind of, everything. I was like, I was gonna die, right? So either I do something or I can't survive. It's too much. I went to hot yoga, and it's funny because when I was going there, it was only female, right? I was the only male in the room, and I was like, okay, well, and you know what I mean. And uh, and then like weeks after weeks, I'm not kidding. Like in the end, it was only males, like only men, and we're talking about big bodybuilders and I was like, what the heck? People were doing their stretching, and it's funny because when you hear the word yoga, right, you have a kind of a spiritual and guru, and, blah, blah, and for me, I'm like, and shanti, I can't, guys. I mean, I grew up in a cult, right? I'm not gonna do that shit. I mean, it's impossible. But I didn't take it this way. I took as an exercise, right? And I realized, oh my God, when you breathe, just breathing, you know, already just breathing can affect your brain waves. So oh my God, like, doing my yoga, I started having, you know, with of course my diet, because I was like, okay, became a vegetarian straight away. I couldn't eat any more meat. I don't know why. I was just like, I can't eat meat. I can't. It's like, yeah. And before, I, I couldn't have one meal without, meat, right? Even a pizza, I needed to have, meat on a pizza. And I was like, no, I can't do this. And ended up having a lot of like experiences, like my dreams. I had lucid dreams. And then I started having out of body experiences. And I was like, what is this? Wow. And then I remembered that I had one when I was a child. So what I did, started reading again. Okay, boom. And I was just reading everything I could find, right? And I still am today. I changed, my life. Going out was just boring. Never liked it really. But you don't know what you like. You see what I mean? Sometimes you don't know what you like until you try something else. That's why what you said, right? If it's all you don't realize sometimes that there is another door. Oh wow. And there is beauty there. and and for me it was kind of like this, right? And then I started, okay, now I'm gonna meditate. I'm gonna do I'm gonna do a kind of uh, I'm gonna challenge myself. I have discipline because I had discipline for my piano. That's the only discipline I ever had, right? So I'm gonna apply that. And every day I'm going to meditate and see how it affects my brain waves. And that's what I started doing. And I realized, oh my God, wow. Like, you know, the meditation, the problem, we have is it is spiritual. And I had a problem with spirituality, right? I grew up in a cult, with different bits of religions and God is this, God is that. So I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not interested in that. But going to, doing my exercise, yoga, right? Doing, then having an experience that is kind of a spiritual. I was like, oh my God, like, how can I explain that? How can we explain that? What is the science behind it? Because I don't want to be, you see what I mean? I was like, I mean, I need to understand. And luckily today we have so much, right? Knowledge, people writing, books, and I mean, there is so much base, yes, so much knowledge, available to us. So one of the pioneers, for the brain waves, especially the binaural beats, the Robert Monroe Institute. You know that?
Not familiar, no.
Bob Monroe, do you know? Uh, highly recommend if you're ever interested. He wrote 3 books because he had an out of body. And I was like, "What's that?" You know, and then he kind of desacralized it, which I thought was amazing. I was like, "Okay, it's normal. Everybody can have one." And because I wanted to have more, because I was like, "But can we? What can we do with this, right? Can we?" And he explains that really well, and especially the binaural beats, right? They tried with Tibetan monks. The Tibetan monks, after trying the binaural beats, said to them, "You can do with the binaural beats in 6 months what takes us 10 years to achieve as a state of consciousness." And I was like, "Oh my God, that's great." So I started to make my own binaural beats, you know, and how could I help my brain heal? And measuring it, and then starting to go really into the neuroscience, reading books from one of the first one was Norman Doidge, the brain that changes itself, I think it is, and then also, I don't know, you probably know, of course, I really liked, Joe Dispenza, Supernatural, The Power of Intent, Bruce Lipton, so from a lot of, different people, I think kind of wiser people who were, already in the field of, okay, I'm not the only one to be in pain. Everybody is in pain, especially today. Everybody is in pain. But there are ways that worked for me. And I realized, well, I'm not the only one. You know, you see what I mean? That's what it goes back to the beginning of the conversation, right? We all think we're so unique and we're just, very similar.
You touched on something there quickly as you're, getting into this next chapter of your life where you got into more healthier ways to, rebalance your body and live more holistically. You talked about, I think it was a book that was the catalyst for all of this. What was that initial book and how did you come across it?
It wasn't, I think, I mean, my first book was Norman Doidge. Norman Doidge, uh, because he was talking about, I think it was someone called Paul Bach-Irita, who employed the word neuroplasticity, right? And it was back in the 60s, right? When science was like, no, we don't really agree with that. We don't really agree with that. And when you grow up in a cult, you realize that you cannot really trust anyone, right? Especially, when I was proven that, yeah, I was right. I mean, I couldn't trust anyone. And what I loved about it was the neuroscience, discovering that the brain is plastic. Because, we were told, if you like this, that's it. There is nothing we can do. But it's not true. We can grow new habits, you know, by and he was, I think, one of the pioneers, for this, Norman Deutsch, his book is amazing, and he's a very intelligent man with a lot of knowledge and in the field. I mean, I don't really have time to talk about, but this book talks how we can basically heal with this, rewire, you know, and this is amazing because we all think, no, that's it, if I'm like this, that's all I am. And that's not correct. You can be much, we are much more than this, right? Like, really much more than this. And he explains it purely scientifically. Okay, the first thing is neuroplasticity. The brain is plastic, you know and it can take, new, like, new rewiring, right? New wires. That makes any sense?
It gave you hope.
It gave me so much hope because I was like, oh my God, like, I mean, he had amazing things, right? Amazing things, I think it was also his dad, but I'm not sure because I read that a long time. I read it actually 2 or 3 times, but a long time ago. Um, but yeah, I think it was even talking about his dad and his brother, and how they helped his dad recover from a stroke. With again, new habits and basically pushing. and you can do a lot. And I realize, being we live in a world that, that is it is what it is, right? But it's not really time for mental issues. No, and right now we talk more about it, but it's not really, for me, I don't think it's really there, right? Because when you talk holistic, it's funny, holistic kind of give me spots. I don't like the word. Like, I don't like the word meditation or the word spiritual, because I have a little problem with this, because it goes quickly into a cult, and I'm really, of course, against that. Everybody should be free and not following anyone, right? At least spiritually speaking. But when you understand that we can take charge of who we want to be, it's amazing, right? On a pure scientific level. And that's what I was looking for, because I couldn't go to spiritual. I was looking for science. Okay, how can science help me, and then with this first book, it opened, a lot of doors of many things around the neuroscience, and of course around also the brainwaves, right? Beta, active talking, right? Alpha, when we're more relaxed. Theta. And I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. So what is theta? What is alpha? What is, delta when they sleep late, right? And I started to go deeper into that as just an amateur researcher. But it worked for me. And I was like, oh my god, it works, when you really control the mind. How do we control the mind, right? Because we all have a weak mind. Come on, let's be fair, right? People don't realize, because we don't care. Like, we just, whatever. But everything affects the mind.
Yeah, it's true. And it sounds like that book was a real catalyst to project, open up a lot of doors and get you living a more healthy lifestyle. But it sounded like there was a moment before that that you hit a rock bottom and things fell apart, projecting you, looking for something new, looking for a new path. Can you talk about what that was and how you, use that as a catalyst to end up finding this book?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I was, at some point, I ended up, smoking a lot of weed for like a couple of years, because I ended up cheating, on my wife, my girlfriend at the time. Um, didn't see it coming, happened, and uh, and then, you feel just the worst person on earth, and it brings back, a lot of trauma, even more, and you can't forgive yourself, and you just want to die, you know. So with everything else, it was just, the little cherry on the cake, and uh, and I couldn't, live like this. Um, so it was, yeah, was losing a lot of weight. I was just basically letting myself die. It was too painful, and and the most painful was, yeah, to hurt, to hurt someone you love, especially that she's the only one who really, kind of, yeah, accepted me and be there for me. See what I mean? And I was like, oh my god, I'm not gonna survive this. And she, I told her, I was like, listen, you need to go. You just, you need to leave me. I've done that, and and she didn't. It's sometimes I don't understand why she didn't. She didn't, and but I couldn't. It's, sometimes when you go too far, you don't realize, you just go deep, and I was just going, to the bottom, and it was against everything I stand for, everything, and and that's why it's this as well it brings, different a lot of different subjects, a lot of sometimes you don't see things coming, right? and and the pain was like literally unbearable. So that's why I was like, just smoking weed. I was like, let's smoke weed, let's just, because the weed is amazing for that, to just waste your life away. It's so true, right? So we're waking up in the morning just smoking one big fat joint, and then two, and then three, and 10 a day. And and I was just, losing weight, just being like, yeah, the shadow of myself, just wanted to die. So anyway, I told her, and then, she, at the same time, my little sister that I didn't see for yeah, pretty much 15 years. She was 8 or 9 when I left. And at the same time, she sent me a message on Twitter, and exactly at the same time. It was just was yeah, it was very, very painful, because I didn't want her to see, you know, to see me like being, you know, you want, especially the people you love, you want them to, to have a lot of respect for you. You want them to look up to you, She wanted to come, so I was like, okay, you come. And I told her as well. I cannot hide, I was like, that's the way I am. I cannot hide, you know, because it's not because I don't think we can really hide anything, to be honest with you. I think anything you do will be, and it's funny because most people don't understand. Like, when you hurt someone, you also hurt yourself. When you angry at someone, you hurt yourself. You angry at yourself. I mean, it's anyway. And then after that, when she came, it was incredible, because it was kind of a ball of light. It was a very, very weird feelings, because she was a woman now. I left her. She was a child. That was that was so so painful, and at the same time so beautiful, because you're just like, wow, life is very, very precious, and we just do shit all the time, and we don't realize how precious that is. And my whole family, they were like small kids, and I was the second, oldest one. And when I left her, yeah, having a child and having a woman, after that, it really, really hurt me, like really, really hurt me. And and at the same time, I don't know, it kind of woke up something, this and my wife. It was like a striking, like something very deep in me, just boom, stop, and I had to fight. And that's why I say, music was the first time it saved my life, and the second was really meditation, which is not really meditation, but it is meditation. But it's a lifestyle, and that's how, from in just one day, poof, changed absolutely everything. And it worked, and it's still working today. However, I have to maintain, because sometimes people think, yeah, when you meditate, you're happy, and then that's fine. That just live it, it's fine. But I realize, oh my God, like, this is part of my life. This is part of, like, my daily routine. And that's where I think the discipline is so important, because now every day, I do, every week I'm going to do my fasting. I do my breathing, because breathing is amazing, right? With my meditation, and my yoga, or I run. But I have a kind of set of things that I do, daily, to keep me, centered, and it works. I'd never take medication, I don't need this stuff, you know what I mean? Because it didn't work for me. And I'm not saying don't take it, right? I mean, obviously, right? I'm not, I don't know anything. Some people it works for them, but for me, after trying everything, I was like, no, this works. And it literally saved my life, yeah. Really, really.
And 3 years ago, when you finally came out of being depressed all your life, was it a culmination of all these different, you've been talking about a lot of lifestyle changes you made for the better. Was it a culmination of all those coming together that allowed your mind to become free of depression, or was there something specific within there that had the biggest impact?
I mean, it was yeah, 5, 6 years ago. And thanks God for that, because I had babies after that, right? So thanks God I didn't have the babies when I was still depressed, because that would have affected them, right? But um, it's I think it was a combination of things, for sure. But those things, they're together, right? They kind of link together, because I realized, by studying, really reading into the brain, the neuroscience, as I said, I realized, oh my God, so everything, affects, right? When we create our reality, right? I mean, If you watch a movie and you watch a horror movie and people are telling you it's okay, it's don't worry, it's a game, it's a movie. Okay, fair enough, but that person is still crying. You're still crying. You're still in a very deep, intense fear. So something from that movie is definitely affecting your brain, and everything around us is affecting your brain. And I was like, but what else can affect my brain? What I eat. I knew I was smoking weed. I mean, that was affecting my brain. Or when I was drinking, couldn't even remember, and all of these things. I was like, oh my god, wow. So I don't have a weak mind. I want to be in control of my mind, and that's what I did. I was like, okay, how do I control my mind? Well, first, stop eating that shit. So I changed, my lifestyle. Okay, let's do it. Let's try. And I always love to push myself because I said, right. I mean, the way I grew up, I have no fear. I had no fear, and I have no fear. So I was like, let's do it. Let's try it. What does it do? What does it do to me? And when I fast, you know, I feel amazing. I love fasting. And when I meditate, I've had experiences that are out, yeah, 1,000 times, infinity more than a movie. But you realize that, okay, to have a better meditation, I realize, I have a better meditation if I fast or if I'm in an environment, right? Because everything's going to affect you. You know what I mean? So it's like trying to find ways. Can you find? And I was experimenting all the time. I bought a lot of little gadgets and books and okay, let's do experiments. Okay, and then, of course, doing them on myself, right? Okay, what is it going to do to me to fast for 5 days? Because the amazing thing I have is resilience, of course, because it was so tough. So screwed up environment when I grew up. It was my childhood. I will never know what it is to be a child, but I do not care because now, I know what it is to be a dad, to be a good human being, I hope. And for me, it's so important, to spread music. Do you see what I mean? So I never saw myself as a victim. I always saw myself as like, come on, together we can do this, right? So I was like learning new things, learning new ways to like let's fast. So I did it. The longest I did was like 8 days or something. And I was, oh my God, I feel amazing. Really feeling amazing. I was like, wow. So now I was like, okay, how can I make my fast a bit easier on myself? Okay, let's try. And then I try. So I try. Okay, I go to midday. Midday, I'm gonna eat like whatever I want, and then I just don't eat in the evening. And already the next day, we are 18, 17, 18 hours. And then I'm like, okay, you wake up in the morning, get busy, and then I can wait to midday. And that's already 24 hours. And people think, oh my God, nothing's impossible. It is. It is very possible and much easier, at least for me, was to start like this. Because if you just wake up in the morning, okay, today I just fast, it's much harder. So if you ate a bit, you see what I mean? It's little ways. And for meditation, the same. I didn't start to meditate when I was very stressed or anxious. So I was like, okay, how can I meditate? And when I was doing exercise, and everybody knows that, right? When you do exercise, at the end of an exercise, you've got just the levels of like endorphins and dopamines and everything. Wow, you feel good. So the best way, try meditate just, at the end of maybe 20 push-ups or a breathing exercise, or you see what I mean? And that's how I started. Because I was like, if you try and meditate when you never meditated and you're like, you're so stressed and stuff, just the way, just closing your eyes will be so painful. And then you're like, okay, it's not for me. So I was like, and then for me, it made sense. I was like, no, let's try slowly. So I started slowly. And then I was, making my own binaural beats, right? So I was like, okay, because binaural beats, as they are an aid to meditation. And I did one, with Calm, the app, my 66, that worked really, really well, where I take the listener, okay, and I kind of shaped, a track to get your sounds and slowly get you in a state. And then I keep you there. And you're free. You're just free of like, your mind will stop wandering at some point. And that's the thing of meditation, right? Because when you're very depressed, that's what it does. Always this little, mind telling you things and people, we say we have 60, 70,000 thoughts a day, which is already a lot. I probably had 100, right? Because I speak fast. So you like, just finding ways, and I'm so glad, it worked, because, I do talk more and more about it, because I think, when we are here right now, there is no fear, right? There is fear in the past, if we think about the past, or in the future. But right now, we're okay. And I realized that. And I was like, oh my God, if you just right now, there is no fear. I was depressed because I was thinking of the past, or I was thinking of the future. So my mind at some point was just like, it was a big mess. And I was like, okay, how to organize it? And by discovering that we have brainwaves, that they can be a bit out of tune sometimes, and taking things slowly, one added to another one, to another one, to another one. And then today, I have to say, like, I have maybe 10% maximum, So I do have episodes, but they're very rare now. And before, it was 90%, episode, and just 10% of, happiness. Now it's 90% of happiness.
You've touched on binaural beats a couple times. So I want to get deeper into what that is specifically. And when you do that, are you getting similar benefits to when you do your meditation, or is that acting on the brain in a totally different way?
So we know that when we meditate, our brain waves are going to change, right? I read so much about it because it's fascinating. There is a lot of hype, and don't believe the hype, but that, you have to do your own research. But there is science, and science is saying the brain waves, our brain waves might represent the full spectrum of human consciousness, right? So the fact that we are conscious. Now, those brain waves are modulated all the time, right? If you hear a gunshot, it's gonna affect your brain waves, and your brain waves are gonna translate into emotions, right? I mean, it's fascinating, and we know that when we have those uh, alpha, the beta waves, for example, is when you and I we talk, we alert, if we have an excess of those, it's depression, anxiety, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I thought, that's for me. That's okay. I probably have these brain waves all the time, and I knew I knew that when I was playing the piano, I was okay. So I was like, "Wow!" And when I tested with my EEG, I was like, "Huh, my brain waves change when I make music." So now, how can I do this as well to meditate? How can music is an extremely powerful tool. I was reading an article in The Guardian a few years ago about, you know, a song by Britney Spears being used in Guantanamo Bay, as a torture tool. So if it can be used as torture, it can be used, to heal as well. Sounds are very, very, very efficient. And that's why the yogi do as well the shanti shanti that I cannot stand. But they do it, you see? And I know it can work for some people without the dogma, right? Because it's just like, oh, I do that. I used to do that for my babies, taking them to bed, like, and it works. 30 seconds, boom, out.
Well, what I'm curious about earlier, you talked about when you started putting your music out into the public, you'd get these messages from people saying, because you just emphasize the fact that it affects you and your mental state and your brain waves when you're creating music. But what do you think it is about certain types of music, including your own, that has this positive effect on people's on their brain, on their brain waves, and the way they think?
I think we still are at the beginning of this, right? To try and understand it, but it's really fascinating because I think the more I think we actually live in an amazing area, right? I mean, an area of life where we can really understand that. Come on, like science, and a lot of people want also to know. Okay, what can we do? How can we be better? And it's really hard for now because we don't have enough, like studies or enough resources, yet. But I hope in the future, and that's something that I'm really looking into because we know that Mozart, affected, it's very good, for babies. Uh, I think it was a study about Wagner, which is a bit different. So it's not all classical music, that has this effect, right? It's not all. So it's very interesting, because we all know that music is going to affect you in many, many different ways, right? Sometimes I'm sure you're like, oh, I love that song. Oh, I discovered that song when I was, I don't know, I was like boating, on a lake, and it brings memories, it brings emotions. It's super powerful. Super, super. I think it's one of the most powerful tools, right? So now, what it is about music like mine, or I don't know, and I don't even know there are music like mine or like yours or like whatever. I think everything is I think it's a bit like a DNA, right? It's like a code, you know, and a code for things. For me, this code, I think, for my music was, I think, for me, right, to because that, not in a selfish way, but I made music for me. I made music to help me get better because it was a need, right? And same way I made binaural bits. I didn't make binaurals. Oh yeah, I want to make binaurals for people. No, no offense, but I want to make it for me. Then if it works for me, then of course, please, I share, and I would love, everybody to get better. But everything I'm always doing is just for me to try and improve myself, and if I feel it and it makes me feel something, then of course you want to share it with the world because sharing is caring.
And I think an interesting analogy is the fact that there are certain foods we know have a negative impact on how we feel and how our bodies perform. To me, it makes sense that there would be certain types of music that are going to have a negative impact on our minds and how we feel. So, using that analogy of having certain foods to fuel the body in a positive way, and then having certain music to fuel, the mind and body in a positive way, versus letting any type of music in that might be taking us down a negative path.
Very well said. Absolutely. There is a music diet for sure. For sure, right? I mean, we see it if you listen to, you know, I mean, I think one very good example is probably EDM as well. When people are like, "Oh my God, I love EDM." Yeah, you've got a rhythm that's gonna be like bum, bum, and this is like hypnosis. Because what is hypnosis? Is just to repeat something, right? So when you get kind of those frequencies with the rhythm, it gets you into a state, you know now the problem, I think, of being receptive to this state, it's really interesting because I saw this study about hypnosis, and they were saying, yeah, only 30% of the population can be hypnotized, and I was like, what kind of like study is that, right? And that was a big study from because I said, everybody can be like hypnosed, right? Then everybody, and we are, because we all are part of a little program, our environment. I mean, I'm the living proof of that with my sect, but not just me. How many people, right, have a dysfunctional family, have the dysfunctional like relationships, they don't know what is love. How do people love people? You see what I mean? So everything is affecting and changing. And what you say about food, as an analogy for music is so true. When you eat well, you do feel the benefits straight away. Now, most people find it hard. Why? Because most of us are addicted to sugar. And it's funny because people are like, oh, but we are all big addicts. I'm sorry, we are, and I can talk about it because I was probably the biggest addicts of all, right? I mean, I was addicted to cigarette, I was addicted to weed, I was addicted to alcohol, I was addicted, and and you realize, wow, when we start doing something, then if we love it, boom, we carry on, we get hypnotized. You know what I mean? But when you stop eating sugar, and there is sugar in everything, right? When you really start, you see how it affects your consciousness. So it doesn't affect just your body, right? And that's not really my area of expertise, but I could tell that my body really changed, right? I have no pain now in my body, right? So it's really interesting to see that if you're healthy, of course, you exercise, you do your stretches, but when you eat well, my God, it affects everything. Your dreams, get more coherent, right? But also the way you perceive things, the way you see what I mean, like everything changes. And that's really amazing. When you see, I was reading this book that I thought was what was it called, by two guys, fire and flow and fire. That rings the bell.
Steven Kotler and somebody else, I believe.
I think so, yes.
Stealing Fire?
Yes, exactly. And I love how they talk about addiction. And some guys, like everybody is like queuing for a coffee in the morning. But that's so true. Everybody's queuing for a coffee. That's an addiction. Because what kind of sane, person would go in the cold every day of the week, just wait in the queue, when you wake up to get your little coffee? Because we love it. Why? Because he gets there. That's why I really barely drink coffee, because he gets me in a state that I cannot. He gets my heart like this, and I'm not saying don't drink coffee, right? Because I'm not here to but I think it affects. It does affect. It affect you. For me, it affected my meditations. When I was drinking coffee, I was meditating like this. So how do I explain that? I don't know. We should, and there is no study about that, but I don't have time to do a study about coffee. But you see what I mean? Everything is kind of.
RIOPY, question for you. When you're creating a piece of music, actually, when you're playing a piece of music for a group, how much do you think your mindset at that time and your intention affect the way that's received?
I love this question, because I don't think I really barely get this question, which is something very, very close to my heart. Um, I always felt, when you are when I play music, it's always different, and in audience, because it's almost like if you feel, the energy of the audience, and then you give back. You know what I mean? And it's so real. We are energy. I'm sorry, I mean, because the only energy we talk about is sexual energy. There is a life energy, right? Which is us. But it's true, right? It's a taboo, but that's the only thing we talk about. But there is so much energy, and when you do, for me, when I do a live concert, of course, it has. It's a different frequency. It's a different, it's much, much more powerful, because everything is just, I just feel like a catalyst. It's just, and yeah, and I lose myself, in the music. I don't feel like I'm myself anymore. You know, but it's a very weird thing, because it's a I it's very, very powerful, yeah, and I think gigs in general are very powerful. But this is another subject by itself, right? Because they did study about, look at football, right? When they play at home, they're most likely to win because of the energy of, being here, and it's a this should be, yeah. I think this should be addressed, a bit more in the future as well. Pretty sure.
Talk more about the state of your mind as you're in the middle of a song, slamming away on those keys. Are you really thinking about where you're going next with your fingers? Or what kind of state are you in?
Never, and that's for me, that's the beauty. I never intellectualize my music, because it comes from uh, you know a place of what some people call the baying level, which is this theta. So I'm in trance. When I'm in a song, I'm just in trance. I'm listening. It's really interesting. It's funny, because every time I'm disturbed when I am doing that, if my then I jump like 1 meter in the air, because I'm not here. I'm in the music. I'm not like thinking about, no. That for me, you cannot create if you're really thinking, because it's a different way. You see what I mean? So let's say if you produce music would be different, because then you can compose, create, and then once the creation, then you put it out there, and you're going to arrange it, mix it, master it. But if you just create, the whole act of creation is not from our head, because we create. If that, I don't know if you see what I mean. It's a different, yeah, it's a different job. So people think, oh yeah, no, when you create something, it's your imagination. It's a different part of the brain, and and for me, that's that's my favorite part of the brain, because it really is magical, right? And then it's the same, I think, place where, yeah, it is the same place where you go into, your own experiences, right? Your imagination. It's funny when people say that to me. It's like, yeah, but imagination is not real. I'm like, of course imagination is real. It is, right? Why? Because before making a building, someone imagined the building, right? Someone thought about it. Yeah, it came from, from a thought, and that's the creation process, right? Creative process. And then once, same for me. Like when I create, I make music, comes, oh, these notes, boom, and then I put it on the on the keyboard, right, and on the piano. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. Has your music changed at all since having kids?
Well, it's funny you say that because I think it has, but at the same time, it's a tricky one because I had kids at the same time of this worldwide, pandemic thing. So I wouldn't know if it is my kids or if it's the pandemic, right? But I always see positive in everything. For me, the positive was that I could spend time with my kids, right? So time also creating, and I've been working on, you know, on different projects, actually even more. Uh, um, you know, I'm more and more into meditation because I think it can save the world. Basically, I really think so. Because when you are, in this state, nothing really bothers you as much, you see. And especially right now when everybody's scared, everybody is, like, it's you know what I mean. So it's a difficult situation, but I think the mental health is, I think, it's very dangerous, basically. So yes, my kids, and the environment and everything, I think in the last 3 years, yeah, it's changing a lot of stuff for sure. Yeah. And I really miss playing live. I miss giving, of course.
Something you changed up when you're recording your last album, Bliss, is the number of hertz. You went to 432 hertz. And I'm just curious, what are hertz and what made you do that?
So the hertz, right? It's the kind of frequency, right? So cycles that the strings, are hit. And I mean, everything has a frequency, right? Our voice, has a frequency, that we measure in hertz, and everything around us. And by the way, the human hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz, roughly, right? Which is funny because that's what we see here, right? On this, and I think this is fascinating because we can hear this, right? But dogs or bees or dolphins, well, they can hear maybe this, right? So it's all about perception, isn't it? And the same way we visualize as well. We can see, but we see this spectrum. Now, when you meditate, when you learn how to meditate, because that's the thing as well, very important as well. People think, yeah, I know how to meditate because they've done it twice. If you've never played the piano and you do it twice, you're not a pianist. You know, You're a pianist after 6 months, yes, 'cause then you can play your piece. Same for meditation, There is no arrogance, there is no need for, like, no one is, you don't measure, no one cares. But if you do it, you'll see for yourself the results are, literally amazing, right? And you start seeing different things, right? In my imagination. And I love using, of course, my meditation and stuff prior to anything I do, because it helps. It helps so much, right? Because you have no fear. You're just like, okay, it's it's fascinating. And the 432 hertz, I received quite a few emails, like maybe a dozen or something, emails. So not that many, but quite many for this topic, of people saying you should try your music in 432 hertz, blah 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 blah. So then I went on Google, our best friend, and Google was like, uh, "This is bullshit, 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 bullshit." And I was like, "Okay, but what is 432 hertz?" So I called some technical engineers, like namely tuners, to come and tune my piano. I was like, "Hey guys, can you tune my piano in 432 hertz, please?" I was like, "No, I can't." I'm like, "Okay." Then another one, "Oh, it's gonna destroy the piano." Then another one, "Why would you do that?" Like, then another it was really funny. Like, no one would tune my piano like this in London. And then one guy who probably was, as crazy as I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, sure, I'd love to do it. It's different. We see." I was like, "Cool, come in." So he came to my place and we recorded the whole piano. Uh, the sound was different. And of course it's different because you've got 440, you've got 444, you've got you've got a lot of different tunings. But the 432, as I was told, by different people, I was like, to try it. I was like, I try it, as simple as that. And it did feel natural for this album, right? This kind of roundness that you have on the album, right? It's a bit more mellow. I think it's a very, very nice, frequency. Now, if you ask me, but is it like a magical frequency, blah blah? I wouldn't know, right? Because I think there is a lot of hype again, and I'm not entirely sure. However, because there is also the bandwidth, right? So it's more complex than that. However, I loved recording in 432 hertz because then I recorded in the south of France my album. My friend had this old house, and it was like, come, so we got like I got like 3 or 4 pianos in total, right? And I had a Fazioli, and I asked the guy to tune it in 432 hertz, and the sound was just amazing, really, really amazing, very mellow, very kind of. I see it like a drop of water, like a really lovely, beautiful, beautiful sound. But maybe it might work in 415, or I'm not entirely sure about that, because it's really hard to find the truth, right, about if there is any, or the studies, or there was actually 2 studies that I remember. One was Italian, and yes, there was a decrease in inflammation with 432 hertz. There was that. I did find that. But it needs more, right? But it needs more as well to just try and listen and see for yourself what you think. Does it work? Does it not work? Right? I even found a study about 528 hertz. Yeah, and I thought that was very interesting as well, because you know it's yeah, a lot of people try things, right? And a study doesn't really mean anything. But the fact that there are studies now that people are looking into it, that music might have, you know, something more than just a random sound, I think we are onto something. And I think that's absolutely amazing, right? I even read one about 111 hertz in mouse, yeah. And they were basically this mice, like this mouse healing faster, being exposed to 111 hertz than the other one.
Fascinating stuff. Do you feel like you're gonna stick with 432 on the next album, or still undecided?
You know, I do not know, because I'm really trying a lot of things, and the next thing is going to be very, very different as well. But I mean, it's funny because when you say that, I'm thinking a lot. I don't really know what tomorrow is really made of. All I know is I'm always open, to try new things, and for me, it's I made music not as a passion, but as a need, and a need to heal, a need, to be happy, a need, to find, you know what I mean? I've always been looking for something, and it's always like this that I made music as well, looking for something, and it's funny because it's almost like in meditation as well, right? When you heard probably about, you know, the whole aim is not to look for anything, but at the same time to have the right intent. And it's funny because that's more the spiritual talking, and I was like, yeah, but what do you mean, like, not looking for anything? And it's true. When you meditate, the whole point is to try to just empty your mind, right? Some people say you cannot do that, but then that's a semantic, issue, right? Because of course we can stop, the wonder, and have just a kind of, I wouldn't say blank mind, but yes, almost no thoughts for sure. And it's amazing because when you don't have this, there is something else. Now, if you put your intent, right? And I discovered that, it's funny because I went to, uh, yeah, we don't have time, but basically, it's an amazing thing because you can do anything you want with your consciousness, right? And that's what music does, right? It takes you somewhere. That's what meditation can do. Anything.
So, Ryopi, your music is just so beautiful. I can feel the love, feel the intention behind it. And you have 3 albums out there. I mentioned the latest one is Bliss. Other than people checking out your music, how can they connect with you after the show?
Yeah, I'm not really good at socials. That's why, but I know we all have to now. But yeah, I mean, I guess Instagram, or like, but I think emails is probably easy. I don't know, Instagram, emails, but yeah, or just listen to music, whatever, whatever works. I'm not sure.
How have people been responding to Bliss versus the first 2 albums?
Very, very well. I'm I am very, very grateful, because, um, yeah, Bliss is working really. All my albums now are really, yeah, working very, very well, and people respond, very positive, And it's funny because, the music the music I do, people respond with a lot of, you know, I have a lot of thank you, and that is, of course, that's the most beautiful thing because you people are touched, people it helps them. So I'm so glad and humbled that it can have a positive impact, because that's, of course, that's what I want. I want just, to it's my little contribution, right? And that's yeah, I want to help, and I can see that music is a powerful tool. What can I say?
Well, keep doing what you're doing. It's helping a lot of people, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. Thank you. Bye.